Hello. Oh, I'm glad. Um, I can't entirely remember where we left off, but I'm excited to see. I'm wondering if this bow is a yay or nay. I don't know how I feel about it. I never know how to place bows. Like, I never know. Hi. I never know if I put them in the right place or not. Thank you. Um, so how is everybody? Thank you. Good. Good. I feel a little off today. I don't know if it's just because I've been busy and I don't know, it's drained me, but um, just a little off. Um, it's okay. Um, yeah, I don't know what else to really say about that. Hmm. Um, yeah, let me see where we had been. I'm curious. Oh yeah, we just got the star. I see. Hair is weird. Do not know if I like bow. Okay. All right. So we are on chapter 5, in which there is much fighting for the crown. Thank you. In the morning's bright light, the young lady seemed more human and less ethereal. She had said nothing since Tristran had woken. He took his knife and cut a fallen tree branch into a Y-shaped crutch while she sat beneath a sycamore tree and glared at him and glowered at him and scowled at him from her place on the ground. He peeled the bark from a green branch and wound it around the upper fork of the Y. They had no breakfast yet, and Tristran was ravenous. His stomach rumbled as he worked. The star had said nothing about being hungry. Then again, she had done nothing at all but look at him, first reproachfully and then with undisguised hatred. He pulled the bark tight, then looped it under itself and tugged it on it once more. This is honestly nothing professional. This is honestly nothing personal, he said to the woman and to the grove. With the full sunlight shining down, she scarcely glittered at all, save for where the darkest shadows touched her. The star ran one pale forefinger up and down the silver chain that went between them, tracing the line of it about her slim wrist, and made no reply. I did it for love, he continued, and you really are my only hope. Her name, that is, the name of my love, is Victoria Forrester, and she is the prettiest, wisest, sweetest girl in the whole world. The girl broke her silence with a snort of derision. And this wise, sweet creature sent you here to torture me? She said. Well, not exactly. You see, she promised me anything I desired, be it her hand in marriage or her lips to kiss, were I to bring her the star that we saw fall the night before last. I had thought, he confessed, that a fallen star would probably look like a diamond or a rock. I certainly wasn't expecting a lady. Yeah, right, exactly. So, having found a lady, could you not have come to her aid or left her alone? Why drag her into your foolishness? Love, he explained. She looked at him with eyes the blue of the sky. I hope you choke on it, she said flatly. I won't, said Tristran with more confidence and good cheer than he actually felt. Here, try this. He passed her the crutch and, reaching down, tried to help her to her feet. His hands tingled, not unpleasantly, where his skin touched hers. She sat on the ground like a tree stump, making no effort to get up. I told you, she said, that I would do everything in my power to frustrate your plans and devices. She looked around at the grove. How very bland this world does look by day, and how dull. Just put your weight on me and the rest on the crutch, he said. You'll have to move sometime. He tugged on the chain, and reluctantly the star began to get to her feet, leaning first against Tristran and then, as if proximity to him disgusted her, on the crutch. She gasped then in a hard intake of breath, and tumbled to the grass, where she lay with her face contorted, making small noises of pain. Tristram knelt down beside her. What's wrong? He asked. Her blue eyes flashed, but they were swimming with tears. My leg! I can't stand on it. It must really be broken. Her skin had gone as white as a cloud, and she was shivering. I'm sorry, said Tristran uselessly. I can make you a splint. I've done it for sheep. It'll be all right. He squeezed her hand, and then he went to the brook and dipped his handkerchief in it and gave it to the star to wipe her forehead. He split more fallen wood with his knife. Then he removed his jerkin and took off his shirt, which he proceeded to tear into strips, which he used to bind the sticks as firmly as he could about her injured leg. The star made no sounds while he did this, although when he pulled the last knot tight, he thought he heard her whimper to herself. Really, he told her, we ought to get you to a proper doctor. I'm not a surgeon or anything. No, she said dryly. You astonish me. He let her rest for a little in the sun, and then he said, better try again, I suppose. And he raised her to her feet. They left the glade at a hobble, the star leaning heavily on her crutch and on Tristran's arm, wincing at every step. And every time she winced or flinched, Tristran felt guilty and awkward, but he calmed himself by thinking of Victoria Forrester's gray eyes. They followed a deer path through the hazelwood, while Tristran, who had decided that the right thing to do was to make conversation with the star, asked how long she had been a star, whether it was enjoyable to be a star, and whether all stars were women, and informed her that he had always supposed stars to be, as Mrs. Cherry had taught them, flaming balls of burning gas many hundreds of miles away, just like the sun, only further away. To all of the questions and statements she made no answer. So why did you fall? He asked. Did you trip over something? She stopped moving and turned and stared at him as if she were examining something quite unpleasant and a very long way away. I did not trip, she said at length. I was hit by this. She reached into her dress and pulled out a large yellowish stone, which dangled from 2 lengths of silver chain. There's a bruise on my side where it hit me and knocked me from the sky, and now I am obligated to carry it about with me. Why? She seemed as if she were about to answer, and then she shook her head, and her lips closed, and she said nothing at all. A stream rilled and splashed to their right, keeping pace with them. The noonday sun was overhead, and Tristran found himself getting increasingly hungry. He took the heel of the dry loaf from his bag, moistened it in the stream, and shared it out, half and half. The star inspected the wet bread with disdain, and did not put it in her mouth. You'll starve, warned Tristran. She said nothing, just raised her chin a little higher. They continued through the woodland, making slow progress. They were laboring up a deer path on the side of a hill, which led them over fallen trees, and which had now become so steep it threatened to tumble the stumbling star and her captor down to the bottom. Is there not an easier path? Asked the star at length. Some kind of road or a level clearing? And once the question was asked, Tristran knew the answer. There is a road half a mile that way, he told her, pointing, and a clearing over there, beyond that thicket, he said, turning to motion in another direction. You knew that? Yes. No. Well, I only knew it once you asked me. Let us make for the clearing, she said, and they pushed through the thicket as best as they could. It still took them the better part of an hour to reach the clearing, but the ground, when they got there, was as level and flat as a playing field. The space seemed to have been cleared with a purpose, but what that purpose was, Tristran could not imagine. In the center of the glade, on the grass some distance from them, was an ornate golden crown, which glittered in the afternoon sunlight. It It was studded with red and blue stones, rubies and sapphires, thought Tristran. He was about to walk over to the crown when the star touched his arm and said, "Wait, do you hear drums?" He realized that he did, a low throbbing beat coming from all around them, near at hand and far away, which echoed through the hills. And then there came a loud crashing noise from the trees at the far side of the clearing, and a high, wordless screaming. Into the glade came a huge white horse, its flanks gashed and bloody. It charged into the middle of the clearing, and then it turned and lowered its head and faced its pursuer, which bounded into the clearing with a growl that made Tristran's flesh prickle. It was a lion, but it looked little enough like the lion Tristran had seen at a fair in the next village, which had been a mangy, toothless, roomy thing. This lion was huge, the color of sand in the late afternoon. It entered the clearing at a run, and then it stopped and snarled at the white horse. The horse looked terrified. Its mane was matted with sweat and blood, and its eyes were wild. Also, Tristran realized it had a long ivory horn jutting from the center of its forehead. It reared up on its hind legs, whinnying and snorting, and one sharp, unshod hoof connected with the lion's shoulder, causing the lion to howl like a huge, scalded cat and to spring backwards. Then, keeping its distance, the lion circled the wary unicorn, its golden eyes at all times fixed upon the sharp horn that was always turned toward it. "Stop them," whispered the star. "They will kill each other." The lion growled at the unicorn. It began as a soft growl like a distant thunder, and finished as a roar that shook the trees and the rocks of the valley and the sky. Then the lion sprang, and the unicorn plunged, and the glade was filled with gold and silver and red, for the lion was on the unicorn's back, claws gashing deeply into its flanks, mouth at its neck, and the unicorn was wailing and bucking and throwing itself onto its back in an effort to dislodge the great cat, flailing uselessly with its hooves and its horn in an effort to reach its tormentor. "Please, do something. The lion will kill him," pleaded the girl urgently. Tristran would have explained to her that all he could possibly hope for if he approached the raging beast was to be skewered and kicked and clawed and eaten, and he would further have explained that, should he somehow survive approaching them, there was still nothing he could do, having with him not even the pail of water, which had been the traditional method of breaking up animal fights in wall. But by the time all these thoughts had gone through his head, Tristran was already standing in the center of the clearing, an arm's length from the beasts. The scent of the lion was deep, animal, terrifying, and Tristran was close enough to see the beseeching expression in the unicorn's black eyes. The lion and the unicorn were fighting for the crown, thought Tristran to himself, remembering the old nursery rhyme. The lion beat the unicorn all about the town. He beat him once, he beat him twice, with all his might and main. He beat him 3 times over, his power to maintain. And with that, he picked up the crown from the grass. It was as heavy and as soft as lead. He walked toward the animals, talking to the lion as he had talked to the ill-tempered rams and agitated ewes in his father's field, saying, "Here now, easy. Here's your crown." The lion shook the unicorn in its jaws like a cat wearing a woolen scarf, and darted a look of pure puzzlement at Tristran. "Hello," said Tristran. There were burrs and leaves in the lion's mane. He held the heavy crown out toward the great beast. "You won. Let the unicorn go." And he took a step closer. Then he reached out both trembling hands and placed the crown upon the lion's head. The lion clambered off of the prone body of the unicorn and began to pad silently about the clearing, its head raised high. It reached the edge of the wood, where it paused for several minutes to lick its wounds with its red tongue. And then, purring like an earthquake, the lion slipped away into the forest. Do lions purr? I think they're one of those cats that don't purr. Like large cats that don't purr. Right? Or do they? I can't remember. Because I know like tigers don't purr, and they do like a chuffing noise instead. But I know that cheetahs do purr. I believe cheetahs do purr. Thank you. Random interlude. But I'm curious, so... Okay. Interesting. so they can't. Yeah. Did I turn on the chat replay for this chat? Hold on. Yes, okay. Just wanted to make sure. Okay. So this way, when people watch it back, they can see the chat box, and it doesn't look like I'm talking to myself. Okay. The star hobbled over to the injured unicorn and lowered herself to the grass awkwardly, her broken legs splayed out by her side. She stroked its head. Poor, poor creature, she said. It opened its dark eyes and stared at her, and then it laid its head upon her lap, and it closed its eyes once more. That evening, Tristran ate the last of the hard bread for his supper, and the star ate nothing at all. She had insisted they wait beside the unicorn, and Tristran had not the heart to refuse her. The clearing was dark now. The sky above them was filled with the twinkling of a thousand stars. The Star Woman glittered too, as if she had been brushed by the Milky Way, while the unicorn glowed gently in the darkness, like a moon seen through the clouds. Tristran lay beside the huge bulk of the unicorn, feeling its warmth radiating out into the night. The star was lying on the other side of the beast. It sounded almost as if she were murmuring a song to the unicorn. Tristran wished that he could hear her properly. The fragments of melody he could make out were strange and tantalizing, but she sang so quietly he could hear next to nothing at all. His fingers touched the chain that bound them. Cold as snow it was, and tenuous as moonlight on a mill pond, or a glint of light on a trout's silver scales as it rises at dusk to feed. And soon he slept. The Witch Queen drove her chariot down a forest path, lashing the flanks of the twin white billy goats with a whip that they had when they flagged. She had observed the small cooking fire burning beside the path from almost half a mile, and she knew from the color of the flames that it was the fire of one of her people, for witch fires burn with certain unusual hues. So she reined in her goats when she reached the brightly painted gypsy caravan and the cooking fire, and the iron-haired old woman who sat beside the fire tending to the spit over the flames on which a hare was roasting. Fat dripped from the hare's open gut, hissing and sizzling in the fire, which gave off the twin aromas of cooking meat and of wood smoke. A multicolored bird sat by the driver's seat at the front of the caravan on a wooden perch. It raised its feathers and called out in alarm when it saw the Witch Queen, but it was chained to its perch and could not leave. Before you says anything, said the gray-haired woman, I should tell ye that I'm just a poor old flower seller, a harmless old biddy who's never done nothing to no one, and that the sight of a grand and terrifying lady such as yourself fills me with dread and fear. I will not harm you, said the Witch Queen. The harridan screwed her eyes to slits, and looked the lady in the red kirtle up and down. That's what you says, she said. But how am I to know that it's so, a sweet old dear like me, who's all a tremble from her toes to her water? You might be planning to rob me in the night, or worse. And she poked the fire with a stick, so it leapt up. The smell of the cooked meat hung on the still evening air. Oh, sorry, I thought there was something else in the chat, but I swear, said the lady in the scarlet kirtle, that by the rules and constraints of the sisterhood to which you and I, sorry, I'll try that again. I swear, said the lady in the scarlet kirtle, that by the rules and constraints of the sisterhood to which you and I belong, by the puissance of the Lilum, and by my lips and breasts and maidenhood, that I mean you no harm, and shall treat you as if you were my own guest. Well, that's good enough for me, dearie ducks, said the old woman, her face breaking into a smile. Come in, sit down. Supper will be cooked in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. Oh, with good will, said the lady in the red kirtle. The goats shuffled and munched at the grass and the leaves beside the chariot, eyeing with distaste the tethered mules that pulled the caravan. Fine goats, said the harridan. The Witch Queen inclined her head and smiled modestly. The firelight glinted on the little scarlet snake wrapped as a bracelet about her wrist. The harridan went on, Now, my dear, my old eyes aren't what they used to be, aren't what once they were by any means, but would I be correct in supposing that one of those fine fellows started life walking on 2 legs, not 4. Such things have been heard of, admitted the Witch Queen. That splendid bird of yours, for example. That bird gave away one of the prizes on my stock of items for sale. Gave it away to a good-for-nothing nearly 2 years ago. And afterward, the trouble she put me through scarcely bears considering. So these days, she stays a bird, unless there's work that needs doing or the flower stall to run. And if I could find a good, strong servant, not afraid of a little hard work, why, then she would stay a bird forever. The bird chirruped sadly upon her perch. They call me Mrs. Semel. Yeah. Mistress Semele, said the harridan. They call you Ditchwater Sow when you were a young chit of a thing, thought the Witch Queen. But she did not say this aloud. You may call me Morwenegg, said the witch instead. It was, she reflected, almost a joke, for Morwenegg means wave of the sea, and her true name was long since drowned and lost beneath the cold ocean. Mistress Semele got off of her feet. Mistress Semele, rather. Mistress Semele got to her feet and made her way into the interior of the caravan, emerging with 2 painted wooden bowls, 2 wooden-handled knives, and a small pot of herbs, dried and flaked to a green powder. I was going to be eating with fingers on a plate of fresh leaves, she said, handing a bowl to the lady in the scarlet kirtle. The bowl had a sunflower painted upon it, under a layer of dust. But I thought, well, how often does I get such fine company? So, nothing but the best. Heads or tails? Let it be your choice, said the guest. Head, then, for you, with the luscious eyes and brains and crispy, crunchy ears of him. And I'll have the rump, with nothing but dull meat to nibble. She lifted the spit off the fire as she spoke, and, using both knives so fast they seemed little more than a glitter of blades, she parted the carcass and sliced the meat from the bones, and dealt it out fairly equitably into each bowl. She passed the pot of herbs to her guest. There's no salt, my dear, but if you shake this on, it'll do the trick. A little basil, a little mountain thyme, my own receipt. The Witch Queen took her portion of roasted hare and one of the knives, and sprinkled a little of the herbs onto her dish. She speared a bite on the point of the knife and ate it with relish, while her hostess toyed with her own portion, then blew on it fastidiously, steam coming from the crisp brown meat. How is it? Asked the old woman. Perfectly palatable, said her guest honestly. It is the herbs make it so fine, explained the harridan. I can taste the basil and the thyme, said the guest. But there is another taste I find harder to place. Ah, said Madame Semele, and she nibbled a sliver of meat. It is certainly a most uncommon taste. That it is. It's an herb that grows only in Garamond, on an island in the midst of a wide lake. It is most pleasant with all manner of meats and fishes, and it reminds me in flavor a little of the leaves of fennel, with but a hint of nutmeg. The flowers of it are a most attractive shade of orange. It is good for wind on the ague. And it is, in addition, a gentle soporific, which has the curious property of causing one who tastes of it to speak nothing but the truth for several hours. The lady in the scarlet kirtle dropped the wooden bowl into the ground. Limbus grass, she said. You dared to feed me limbus grass. That's how it would seem, dearie, said the old woman, cackling. And the old woman cackled and hooted with delight. So tell me now, Mistress Morwenegg, if that is your name. Morwenegg, if that is your name, where are you a-going of in your fine chariot, and why do you remind me so much of someone I once knew? And Madame Semele forgets nothing and no one. I am on my way to find a star, said the Witch Queen, which fell in the great woods on the other side of Mount Belly, and when I find her, I shall take my great knife and cut out her heart while she lives, and while her heart is her own, for the heart of a living star is a sovereign remedy against all the snares of age and time. My sisters wait for me to return. Madame Semele hooted and hugged herself, swaying back and forth, bony fingers clutching her sides. The heart of a star, is it? Such a prize it will make for me. I shall taste enough of it that my youth will come back, and my hair turn from gray to golden, and my dugs swell and soften and become firm and high. Then I shall take all the heart that's left to the great market wall. He! You shall not do this thing, said her guest very quietly. No? You are my guest, my dear. You swore your oath. You've tasted of my food. According to the laws of our sisterhood, there is nothing you can do to harm me. Oh, there are so many things I could do to harm you, Ditchwater Sal, but I shall simply point out that one who has eaten limbus grass can speak nothing but the truth for several hours afterward. And one more thing. Distant lightning flickered in her words as she spoke, and the forest was hushed as if every leaf and every tree were listening intently to what she said. This I say, you have stolen knowledge that you did not earn, but it shall not profit you. For you shall be unable to see the star, unable to perceive it, unable to touch it, to taste it, to find it, to kill it. Even if another were to cut up its heart and give it to you, you would not know it, never know what you had in your hands. This I say, these are my words, and they are a true speaking. And know this also, I swore, by the compact of the sisterhood, that I would do you no harm. Had I not so sworn, I would change you into a black beetle, and I would pull your legs off one by one, and leave you for the birds to find for putting me in this indignity. Madame Semille's eyes opened wide with fright, and she stared over the flames of the fire at her guest. Who are you? She said. When you knew me last, said the woman in the scarlet kirtle, I ruled with my sisters in Carnadine, before it was lost. You? But you are dead, long dead. They have said that the Lillim were dead before now, but they have always lied. The squirrel has not yet found the acorn that will grow into the oak that will be cut to form the cradle of the babe who will grow to slay me. The squirrel has not yet found the acorn that will grow into the oak that will be cut to form the cradle of the babe who will grow to slay me. Silver flashes glittered and flared in the flames as she spoke. So it is you. And you have your youth back, Madame Semille sighed. And now I too shall be young again. The lady in the scarlet kirtle stood up then and placed the bowl which had contained her portion of hair into the fire. You shall be nothing of the kind, she said. Did you not hear me? A moment after I leave, you shall forget that ever you saw me. You shall forget all of this, even my curse, although the knowledge of it shall vex and irritate you like an itch in a limb long since amputated. And may you treat your guests with more grace and respect in the future. The wooden bowl burst into flames then, a huge gout of flame which singed the leaves of the oak tree far above them. Madame Semille knocked the blackened bowl from the fire with a stick, and she stamped it out in the long grass. Whatever could have possessed me to drop the bowl into the fire? She exclaimed aloud. And look, one of my nice knives all burned up and ruined. Whatever was I a-thinking? There came no answer. From further down the road came the drumming beats of something that might have been the hooves of goats racing on into the night. Madame Semille shook her head as if to clear it of dust and cobwebs. I'm getting old, she said to the multicolored bird who sat on its perch by the driver's seat, and who had observed everything and forgotten nothing. Getting old. And there's no doing anything about that. The bird shifted uncomfortably on the perch. Yeah, I believe her too. A red squirrel quested, hesitating a little, into the firelight. It picked up an acorn, held it for a moment in its hand-like front paws as if it were praying. Then it ran away to bury the acorn and forget it. So that might be the squirrel and the acorn that she was just talking about. That's interesting. Skaith's Ebb is a small seaport town built on granite, and a town of chandlers and carpenters and sailmakers, of old sailors with missing fingers and limbs who have opened their own grog houses or spend their days in them. What is left of their hair is still tarred into long queues, though the stubble on their chins has long since dusted to white. There are no whores in Skaith's Ebb, or none that consider themselves as such, although there have always been many women who, if pressed, would describe themselves as much married, with one husband on this ship here every 6 months, and another husband on that ship back in port for a month or so every 9 months. The mathematics of the thing have always kept most folk satisfied, and if ever it disappoints and a man returns to his wife while one of her other husbands is still in occupancy, why, then there is a fight, and the grog shops to comfort the loser. The sailors do not mind the arrangement, for they know that this way there will, at the least, be one person who, at the last, will notice when they do not come back from the sea, and will mourn their loss. And their wives content themselves with a certain knowledge that their husbands are also unfaithful, for there is no competing with the sea in a man's affection, since she is both mother and mistress, and she will wash his corpse also, in time to come, wash it to coral and ivory and pearls. So it was to Skate's Ebb that Lord Primus of Stormhold came one night, all dressed in black, with a beard as thick and serious as one of the stork's nests in the town's chimneys. He came in a carriage drawn by 4 black horses, and he took a room in the Seaman's Rest on Crook Street. Yeah, right? Very grim. So it was. He was considered most peculiar in his needs and requests, for he brought his own food and drink into his rooms, and kept it locked in a wooden chest, where he would only open to take himself an apple, or a wedge of cheese, or a cup of pepper wine. His was the topmost room in the Seaman's Rest, a high and spindly building built on a rocky outcrop to facilitate smuggling. He bribed a number of the local street urchins to report to him the moment they saw any fellow they did not know come to town by land or sea. In particular, they were there to look for a very tall, angular, dark-haired fellow with a thin, hungry face and blank eyes. Primus is certainly learning caution, said Secundus to his 4 other dead brothers. Well, you know what they say, whispered Quintus in the wistful tones of the dead, which sounded on that day like the lapping of distant waves upon the shingle. A man who is tired of looking over his shoulder for Septimus is tired of life. In the mornings, Primus would talk to the sea captains with the ships in Skate's Ebb, buying them grog liberally. Neither drinking nor eating with them. Buying them grog liberally, but neither drinking nor eating with them. In the afternoon, he would inspect the ships in the docks. Soon the gossips of Skate's Ebb, and there were many, had the gist and juice of it all. The bearded gentleman was to be taking ship to the east, and this tale was soon chased by another, that he would be sailing out on the Heart of a Dream, under Captain Jan, a black-trimmed ship with its decks painted crimson red, of more or less savory reputation, by which I mean that it was generally held that she kept her piracies for distant waters. And this would be happening soon as he gave the word. Good master, said a street urchin to Lord Primus, there's a man in town, come by land. He lodges with Mistress Pettier. He is thin and crow-like, and I saw him in the ocean's roar, buying grog for every man in the room. He says he is a distressed seafaring man, seeking a berth. Primus patted the boy's filthy head and handed him a coin. Then he returned to his preparations, and that afternoon it was announced that the Heart of a Dream would leave harbor in 3 short days. The day before the Heart of the Dream was to set sail, Primus was seen to sell his coach and 4 horses to the stableman on Wardle Street, after which he walked down to the quay, dispensing small coins to the urchins. He entered his cabin in the Heart of a Dream and gave strict orders that none was to disturb him for any reason, good or bad, until they were at least a week out of port. That evening, an unfortunate accident befell an able seaman who had crewed the rigging of the Heart of a Dream. He fell, when drunk, on the slippery cobblestones of Revenue Street and broke his hip. Luckily, there was a replacement at the ready, the very sailor with whom he had been drinking that evening, and to whom the injured man had been persuaded to demonstrate a particularly complicated hornpipe step on the wet cobbles. And this sailor, tall, dark, and crow-like, marked his ship's papers with a circle that night, and was on deck at dawn when the ship set sail out of the harbor in the morning mist. The Heart of a Dream sailed east. Lord Primus of Stormhold, his beard freshly shaven, watched it sail from the cliff top until it was lost to view. Then he walked down to Wardle Street, where he returned the stableman's money and something more besides, and he rode off on the coast road toward the west in a dark coach pulled by 4 black horses. That was pretty clever. He didn't actually get on the ship. It was an obvious solution. After all, the unicorn had been ambling hugely behind them for most of the morning, occasionally nudging the star's shoulder with its big forehead. The wounds on its dappled flanks, which had blossomed like red flowers under the lion's claws the days before, were now dried to brown and scabbed over. The star limped and hobbled and stumbled, and Tristran walked beside her, cold chain binding wrist to wrist. On the one hand, Tristran felt there was something almost sacrilegious about the idea of riding the unicorn. It was not a horse, did not subscribe to any of the ancient pacts between man and horse. There was a wildness in its black eyes, and a twisting spring to its step which was dangerous and untamed. On the other hand, Tristran had begun to feel in a way that he could not articulate that the unicorn cared about the star and wished to help her. So he said, "Look, I know all that stuff about frustrating my plans every step of the way, but if the unicorn is willing, perhaps it would carry you on its back for a little while." The star said nothing. "Well," she shrugged. Tristran turned to the unicorn, stared into its pool-black eyes. "Can you understand me?" he asked. It said nothing. He had hoped it would nod its head or stamp a hoof like a trained horse he had once seen on the village green when he was younger. But it simply stared. "Will you carry the lady? Please?" The beast said not a word, nor did it nod or stamp, but it walked to the star and it knelt down at her feet. Tristran helped the star onto the unicorn's back. She grasped its tangled mane with both hands and sat side saddle upon it, her broken legs sticking out. And that was how they traveled for some hours. Tristran walked alongside them, carrying her crutch over his shoulder with his bag dangling from the end. He found it as hard to travel with the star riding the unicorn as it had been before. Then, he had been forced to walk slowly, trying to keep pace with the star's limping hobble. Now he was hurrying to keep up with the unicorn, nervous lest the unicorn should get too far ahead and the chain that linked them both should pull the star from the beast's back. His stomach rumbled as he walked. He was painfully aware of how hungry he was. Soon Tristran began to think of himself as nothing more than hunger, thinly surrounded by flesh, and as fast as he could, walking. He stumbled and knew that he was going to fall. "Please stop," he gasped. The unicorn slowed and stopped. The star looked down at him. Then she made a face and shook her head. "You had better come up here too," she said, if the unicorn will let you. Otherwise you'll just faint or something and drag me onto the ground with you. And we need to go somewhere so that you can get food." Tristran nodded gratefully. The unicorn appeared to offer no opposition, waiting passively, so Tristran attempted to clamber up onto it. It was like climbing a sheer wall, and as fruitless. Eventually, Tristran led the animal over to a beech tree that had been uprooted several years before by a storm, or a high wind, or an irritable giant, and holding his bag and the star's crutch, he scrambled up the roots onto the trunk, and from there onto the back of the unicorn. "There is a village on the other side of that hill," said Tristran. "I expect that we can find something to eat when we get there." He patted the unicorn's flanks with his free hand. The beast began to walk. Tristran moved his hand to the star's waist to steady himself. He could feel the silken texture of her thin dress, and beneath that, the thick chain of the topaz about her waist. Riding a unicorn was not like riding a horse. It did not move like a horse. It was a wilder ride, and a stranger one. The unicorn waited until Tristran and the star were comfortable upon its back, and then slowly and easily it began to put on speed. The trees surged and leapt past them. Sorry, what was you today? Oh, I'm sorry. The trees surged and leapt past them. The star leaned forward, her fingers tangled into the unicorn's mane. Tristran, his hunger forgotten in his fear, gripped the sides of the unicorn with his knees and simply prayed that he would not be knocked to the ground by a stray branch. Soon he found he was beginning to enjoy the experience. There is something about riding a unicorn for those people who still can, which is unlike any other experience, exhilarating and intoxicating and fine. The sun was setting when they reached the outskirts of the village. In a rolling meadow, beneath an oak tree, the unicorn came to a skittish halt and would go no further. Tristran dismounted and landed with a bump on the grass of the meadow. With a bump on the grass of the meadow. His rump felt sore, but with the star looking down at him, uncomplaining, he dared not to rub it. "Are you hungry?" he asked the star. She said nothing. "Look," he said, "I'm starving, perfectly famished. I don't know if stars eat or what they eat, but I won't have you starving yourself." He looked up at her, questioning. She stared down at him, first impassively in a trice, her blue eyes filled with tears. First impassively, then, in a trice, her blue eyes filled with tears. She raised a hand to her face and wiped away the tears, leaving a smudge of mud on her cheeks. "We eat only darkness," she said, "and we drink only light. So I'm not hungry. I'm lonely and scared and cold and much miserable and captured, but I'm not hungry." "Don't cry," said Tristran. "Look, I'll go into the village and get some food. You just wait here. The unicorn will protect you if anyone comes." He reached up and gently lifted her down from the unicorn's back. The unicorn shook its mane, then began to crop the grass of the meadow contentedly. The star sniffed. "Wait here?" she asked, holding up the chain that joined them. "Oh," said Tristran, "give me your hand." He reached her hand out to him. He fumbled with the chain to undo it, but it would not undo. Said Tristran. He tugged at the chain around his own wrist, but it too held fast. "It looks," he said, "as if I'm as tied to you as you are to me." The star threw her hair back, closed her eyes, and sighed deeply. And then, opening her eyes once again, self-possessed, she said, "Perhaps it's a magic word or something." "I don't know any magic words," said Tristran. He held up the chain up. It glittered red and purple in the light of the setting sun. "Please?" he said. There was a ripple in the fabric of the chain, and he slid his hand out of it. "Here you go," he said, passing the star the other end of the chain that had bound her. "I'll try not to be too long, and if any of the fair folks sing their silly songs at you, for heaven's sake, don't throw your crutch at them. They'll only steal it." "I won't," she said. "I'll have to trust you on your honor as a star not to run away," he said. She touched her splinted leg. "I will do no running for quite some time," she said pointedly. And with that, Tristran had to content himself. He walked the last half a mile into the village. It had no inn, being far off the beaten track for travelers, but the portly old woman who explained this to him then insisted he accompany her to her cottage, where she pressed upon him a wooden bowl full of barley porridge with carrots in it and a mug of small beer. He exchanged his cambric handkerchief for a bottle of elderflower cordial, a round of green cheese, and a number of unfamiliar fruits. They were soft and fuzzy like apricots, but were the purple blue of grapes, and they smelled a little like ripe pears. Also, the woman gave him a small bale of hay for the unicorn. He walked back to the meadow where he had left them, munching on a piece of the fruit, which was juicy and chewy and quite sweet. He wondered if the star would like to try one, whether she would like it if she He wondered if the star would like to try one, whether she would like it if she did. He hoped that she would be pleased with what he had brought her. At first, Tristran thought that he must have made a mistake and that he had lost his way in the moonlight. No, this was the same oak tree, the one beneath which the star had been sitting. "Hello?" he called. Glowworms and fireflies glittered green and yellow in the hedgerows, and in the hedgerows, and in the branches of trees. There came no reply, and Tristran felt a sick, stupid feeling in the pit of his stomach. "Hello?" he called. He stopped calling then because there was no one to answer. He dropped the bale of hay and then kicked it. She was to the southwest of him, moving faster than he could walk. He followed after her in the bright moonlight. Inside, he felt numbed and foolish, stung by a pang of guilt and shame and regret. He should not have loosened her chain. He should have tied it to a tree. He should have forced the star to go with him into the village. This went through his head as he walked, but another voice spoke to him also, pointing out that if he had not unchained her, then he would have done it sometime soon. If he had not unchained her then, he would have done it sometime soon, and she would have run from him then. He wondered if he would ever see the star again, and he stumbled over roots as the way led him between old trees into the deep woods. The moonlight slowly vanished beneath a thick canopy of leaves, and after stumbling vainly in the dark for a short while, he laid himself down beneath a tree, rested his head on his bag, and closed his eyes and felt sorry for himself until he fell asleep. On a rocky mountain pass on the southernmost slopes of Mount Belly, the Witch Queen reined in her goat-drawn chariot and stopped and sniffed the chilly air. The myriad stars hung cold in the sky above her. Her red lips curved up into a smile of such beauty, such brilliance, such pure and perfect happiness that it would have frozen your blood in your veins had to have seen it. "There," she said, "she is coming to me." And the wind of the mountain pass howled about her triumphantly as if in answer. Primus sat beside the embers of his fire, and he shivered beneath his thick black robe. On the black stallions, one of the black stallions, waking or dreaming, whinnied and snorted and then rested once more. Primus's face felt strangely cold. He missed his thick beard. With a stick, he pushed a clay ball from the embers. He spat on his hands and then split open the hot clay and smelled the sweet flesh of the hedgehog, which had cooked slowly in the embers, and he slept, as he had slept. He ate his breakfast meticulously, spitting the tiny bones into the fire circle once he had chewed the meat from them. He washed the hedgehog down with a lump of hard cheese and a slightly vinegary white wine. Once he had eaten, he wiped his hands upon his robe, and then he cast the ruins to find the topaz stone which conferred the lordship of the crag towns and the vast estates of Stormhold. He cast them, and he stared, puzzled, at the small square red granite tiles. He picked them up once more, shook them in his long-fingered hands, dropped them onto the ground, and stared at them again. Then Primus spat into the embers, which hissed lazily. He swept the tiles up and dropped them into the pouch of his belt. "It is moving faster, further," said Primus to himself. He pissed on the embers of the fire, for he was in wild country, and there were bandits and hobgoblins and worse in those lands, and he had no desire to alert him of his presence. Then he hitched the horses to the carriage and climbed into the driver's seat and drove them toward the forest, to the west, and to the mountain range beyond. The girl held tight to the unicorn's neck as it tumbled headlong through the dark forest. There was no moonlight between the trees, but the unicorn glimmered and shone with pale light like the moon, while the girl herself glittered and glowed as if she trailed a dust of lights. As she passed through the trees, it might have appeared to a distant observer that she seemed to twinkle, on and off, and on and off. On and off, and off and on, like a tiny star. Now we're on chapter 6, which is What the Tree Said. But I'm going to take a second and take some water. I'm sorry if I'm not reading as well as I normally do, guys. I am, like I said before, I am tired today. It has just been a very busy time. And thankfully, I actually have off from work tomorrow, so maybe I will just try to relax as much as I can. And yeah. Oh, thank you. I feel like I'm like stammering a lot and tripping over my words. But I appreciate that. I just can't like predict where things are going like I normally do when I'm reading today. I think it's my concentration. I think I'm just tired and like I can't like might lose my focus very quickly. So like from the start of the sentence to the end of the sentence, I'll forget where things are going. And I feel like that's happening even when I'm talking out loud. It's just my brain's like, no. Yeah, I think so. I'm glad you haven't noticed it. I appreciate you saying that. I'm like not sure how I feel about the makeup I did today. It's like I kind of like it, but I also kind of don't. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it doesn't. I don't know. It just didn't come out looking as good as like I can do sometimes. Like the purple. So it's a pretty pigmented palette that I got the purple from, which is like here-ish, that purple. But at the same time, it doesn't feel dark enough. It wasn't how I anticipated that it would look, I guess. But I tried. Thank you. That was my plan. Thank you. My goodness. Okay. So let me see. All right. So what the tree said. Tristran Thorn was dreaming. Oh, thank you. He was in an apple tree, staring through a window at Victoria Forrester's, who was getting undressed. As she removed her dress, revealing a healthy expanse of petticoat, Tristran felt the branch begin to give way beneath his feet, and then he was tumbling down through the air and the moonlight. He was falling into the moon, and the moon was talking to him. Please, whispered the moon in a voice that reminded him a little of his mother's. Protect her. Protect my child. They mean her harm. I have done all I can. And the moon would have told him more, and perhaps she did, but the moon became the glimmer of moonlight on the water far below him, and then he became aware of a small spider walking across his face, and of a crick in his neck, and he raised a hand and brushed the spider carefully from his cheek, and the morning sun was in his eyes, and the world was gold and green. You were dreaming, said a young woman's voice from somewhere above him. The voice was gentle and oddly accented. He could hear leaves rustle in the copper beech tree overhead. Yes, he said to whoever was in the tree. I was dreaming. I had a dream last night too, said the voice. In my dream, I looked up and I could see the whole forest, and something huge was moving through it. And it got closer and closer, and I knew what it was. She stopped talking and it got closer and closer, and I knew what it was. She stopped talking abruptly. What was it? Said Tristran. Everything, she said. It was Pan. When I was very young, somebody, maybe it was a squirrel, they talk so much, or a magpie, or maybe a fishy, told me that Pan owned all this forest. Well, not owned. Not like he would sell the forest to someone else, or put a wall all around it, or cut down the trees, said Tristran helpfully. There was a silence. He wondered where the girl had gone. Hello? He said. Hello? There was another rustle of leaves from above him. You shouldn't say things like that, she said. Sorry, said Tristran, not entirely sure what he was apologizing for. But you were telling me that Pan owned the forest. Of course he does, said the voice. It's not hard to own something, or everything. You just have to know that it's yours and then be willing to let it go. Pan owns this forest like that. And in my dream, he came over to me. You were in my dream, too, leading a sad girl by a chain. She was a very sad, sad girl. Pan told me to help you. Me? And it made me feel all warm and tingly and squishy inside, from the tips of my leaves to the end of my roots. So I woke up, and there you were, fast asleep with your head by my trunk, snoring like a pigwidgeon. Tristran scratched his nose. He stopped looking for a woman in the branches of the copper beech tree above him, and looked instead at the tree itself. You are a tree, said Tristran, putting his thoughts into words. I didn't always used to be a tree, said the voice in the rustling of the copper beech leaves. A magician made me a tree. What were you before? Said Tristran. Do you think he likes me? Who? Pan. If you were the lord of the forest, you wouldn't give a job to someone, tell them to give all possible aid and succor, unless you like them, would you? Well, said Tristran, but before he had decided on the politic answer, the tree had already said, A nymph. I was a wood nymph. But I got pursued by a prince, not a nice prince, the other kind, and, well, you'd think a prince, even the wrong kind, would understand about boundaries, wouldn't you? You would? Exactly what I think, but he didn't. So I did a bit of invoking while I was running, and ba-boom, tree. What do you think? Well, said Tristran, I do not know what you were like as a wood nymph, madam, but you are a magnificent tree. The tree made no immediate reply, but her leaves rustled prettily. I was pretty cute as a wood nymph, too, she admitted coyly. What kind of aid and succor exactly? Said Tristran. Not that I am grumbling. I mean, right now I need all the aid and succor I can get. But a tree is not necessarily the obvious place to look for it. You cannot come with me, or feed me, or bring the star here, or send us back to the wall to see my true love. I'm certain you would do a remarkable job of keeping off the rain, were it to rain, but it is not, at present, raining. The tree rustled. Why don't you tell me your story so far, said the tree, and let me be the best judge of whether or not I can be of help. And let me be the best judge of whether or not I can be of help. Tristran began to protest. He could feel the star moving further and further away from him at the speed of a cantering unicorn, and if there was one thing he did not have time for, it was the recitation of the adventures of his life to date. But then it occurred to him that any progress he had made on his quest so far had been made by accepting the help that had been offered to him. So he sat on the woodland floor and he told the copper beech everything he could think of about his love, pure and true, for Victoria Forrester, his promise to bring her a fallen star, not any fallen star, but the one they had seen together, uh, from the top of Diddy's Hill, or Didy's Hill, and of his journey into Fairy. He told the tree of his journeyings, of the little hairy man, and of the small fair folk who stole his bowler hat. He told her of the magic candle and his walk across the leagues to the star's side in the glade, and of the lion and the unicorn, and of how he had lost the star. He finished his story, and there was silence. The copper leaves on the tree shivered softly, as if in a gentle wind, and then harder, as if a storm were coming. And then the leaves formed a fierce, low voice which said, if you had kept her chained, and she had escaped her chains, then there is no power on earth or sky could ever make me help you. Not if great Pan or Lord Sylvia herself were to plead or implore me. But you unchained her, and for that I will help you. Thank you, said Tristran. I will tell you three true things. Two of them I will tell you now, and the last is for when you need it most. You will have to judge for yourself when that will be. First, the star is in great danger. What occurs in the midst of a wood is soon known at its What occurs in the midst of a wood is soon known at its furthest borders, and the trees talk to the wind, and the wind passes the word along to the next wood it comes to. There are forces that mean her harm, and worse than harm. You must find her and protect her. Secondly, there is a path through the forest, off past the that fir tree, and I could tell you things about that fir tree that would make a boulder blush. In a few minutes, a carriage will be coming down the path. Hurry, and you will not miss it. And thirdly, hold out your hands. Tristran held out his hands. From high above him, a copper-colored leaf came falling slowly, spinning and gliding and tumbling down. It landed neatly in the palm of his right hand. There, said the tree. Keep it safe, and listen to it when you need it most. Now, she told him, the coach is nearly here. Run! Run! Tristran picked up his bag and he ran, fumbling the leaf into the pocket of his tunic as he did so. He could hear hoofbeats through the glade, coming closer and closer. He knew that he could not reach it in time, despaired of reaching it, but still he ran faster, until all he could hear was his heart pounding in his chest and his ears, and the hiss of air as he pulled it into his lungs. He scrambled and dashed through the bracken, and made it to the path as the carriage came down the track. It was a black coach drawn by 4 night-black horses, driven by a pale fellow in a long black robe. It was 20 paces from Tristran. He stood there gulping breath, and then he tried to call out, but his throat was dry, and his wind was gone, and his voice came from him in a dry sort of croaking whisper. He tried to shout and simply wheezed. By the way, I'm wondering if Primus is actually trying to disguise himself as Septimus, so that I can't think of what his goal would be, but just the idea that now he's got this whole black theme going, which is what Septimus has, and 4 black horses like Septimus. I think Septimus had them pulling his carriage. And now he has shaved his beard and stuff, because Septimus didn't have a beard. Or I believe Septimus didn't have a beard. Yeah, I don't know what he's doing, but there's something going on. The carriage passed him by without slowing. Tristran sat on the ground and caught his breath. Then, afraid for the star, he got back to his feet and walked, as fast as he could manage, along the forest path. He had not walked for more than 10 minutes when he came upon the black coach. A huge branch itself, as big as some trees, had fallen from an oak tree onto the path directly in front of the horses, and the driver, who was also as the coach's sole occupant, was endeavoring to lift it out of the way. "Damnedest thing," said the coachman, who wore a long black robe and who Tristran estimated to be in his late 40s. There was no wind, no storm. It simply fell, terrified the horses. His voice was deep and booming. Tristran and the driver unhitched the horses and roped them to the oak branch. "Thanks for the solid, trees." Then the 2 men pushed and the 4 horses pulled, and together they dragged the branch to the side of the track. Tristran said a silent thank you to the oak tree whose branch had fallen, to the copper beech, and to Pan of the forests. And then he asked the driver if he would give him a ride through the forest. "I do not take passengers," said the driver, rubbing his bearded chin. "Oh. Weird, because didn't he just shave? Maybe it's growing again. I don't know. Of course," said Tristran, "but without me, you would still be stuck here. Surely Providence sent you to me, just as Providence sent me to you. I will not take you out of your path, and there may again come a time when you are glad of another pair of hands." The coach driver looked Tristran over from his head to his feet. Then he reached into the velvet bag that hung from his belt and removed a handful of square red granite tiles. "Pick one," he said to Tristran. Tristran picked a stone tile and showed the symbol carved upon it to the man. Was all the driver said. "Now pick another." Tristran did so. "And another." The man rubbed his chin once more. "Yes, you can come with me," he said. The rune seemed certain of that. "Although there will be danger, but perhaps there will be more fallen branches to move. You can sit up front, if you wish, on the driver's seat beside me, and keep me company." It was a peculiar thing, observed Tristran as he climbed up onto the driver's seat, but the first time he had glanced into the interior of the coach, he had fancied that he saw 5 pale gentlemen, all in gray, staring sadly out at him. But the next time he had looked inside, nobody had been there at all. The carriage rattled and pounded over the grassy track beneath a golden-green canopy of leaves. Tristran worried about the star. She might be ill-tempered, he thought, but it was with a certain amount of justification, after all. He hoped that she could stay out of trouble until he caught up with her. It was sometimes said that the gray and black mountain range, which ran like a spine north to south down the part of Fairy, had once been a giant who grew so huge and so heavy that one day, worn out from the sheer effort of moving and living, he had stretched out on the plain and fallen into a sleep so profound that centuries passed between heartbeats. This would have been a long time ago if it ever happened, in the first age of the world, when all was stone and fire, water and wind, and there were few things alive. Sorry, hold on. Few left alive to put the lie to it if it was not true. Still, true or not, they called the 4 great mountains of the range Mount Head, Mount Shoulder, Mount Belly, and Mount Knees, and the foothills to the south were known as the Feet. There were passes through the mountains, one between the head and the shoulders, where the neck would have been, and one immediately to the south of Mount Belly. They were wild mountains, inhabited by wild creatures, slate-colored trolls, hairy wildmen, strayed wadwoos, mountain goats and mining gnomes, hermits and exiles, and the occasional peak witch. This was not one of the really high mountain ranges of Fairy, such as Mount Huon, on the top of which is the Stormhold, but it was a hard range for lone travelers to cross nonetheless. The Witch Queen had crossed the path south of Mount Belly in a couple of days, and now waited at the opening of the pass. Her goats were tethered to a thorn bush, which they chewed without enthusiasm. She sat on the side of the unhitched chariot and sharpened her knives with a whetstone. The knives were old things, like the hilts were made of bone, while the blades were chipped volcanic glass, black as jet, with white snowflake shapes frozen forever into the obsidian. There were two knives, the smaller a hatchet-bladed cleaver, heavy and hard for cutting through the rib cage, for jointing and segmenting. The other a long dagger-like blade for cutting out the heart. When the knives were so sharp that she could have drawn either blade across your throat, and you would never have felt more than the touch of the lightest hair, as the spreading warmth of your life's blood made a quiet escape, the Witch Queen put them away and commenced her preparations. She walked over to the goats and whispered a word of power to each of them. Where the goats had been stood a man with a white chin beard, and a boyish, dull-eyed young woman. They said nothing. She crouched beside her chariot and whispered several words to it. The chariot did nothing, and the witch woman stamped her foot on the rock. I am getting old, she said to her two servants. They said nothing in reply, gave no indication that they even understood her. Things inanimate have always been more difficult to change than things animate. Their souls are older and stupider and harder to persuade. If I had but my true youth again. Why, in the dawn of the world, I could transform mountains into seas and clouds into palaces. I could populate cities with the pebbles of the shingle. If I were young again. She sighed and raised a hand. A blue flame flickered about her fingers for a moment, and then, as she lowered her hand and bent down to touch her chariot, the fire vanished. She stood up straight. There were streaks of gray now in her raven-black hair, and dark pouches beneath her eyes, but the chariot was gone, and she stood in front of a small inn at the edge of the mountain pass. Far away from the thunder rumbled quietly, and lightning flickered in the distance. The inn sign swung and creaked in the wind. There was a picture of a chariot painted upon it. You two, said the witch woman, inside. She's riding this way, and she will have to come through this pass. Now I simply have to ensure that she will come inside. You, she said to the man with a white chin beard, are Billy, the owner of this tavern. I shall be your wife, and this, pointing to the dull-eyed girl who had once been Brevis, is our daughter, the potmaid. Another crash of thunder echoed down from the mountain peaks, louder than before. It will rain soon, said the witch woman. Let us prepare the fire. Tristran could feel the star ahead of them, moving steadily onward. He felt as if he were gaining ground upon her, and, to his relief, the black carriage continued to follow the star's path. Once, when the roads diverged, Tristram was concerned that they might take the wrong fork. He was ready to leave the coach and travel on alone if that should happen. His companion reined in the horses, clambered down from the driver's seat, and took out his ruins. Then, his consultation complete, he climbed back up and took the carriage down to the left-hand fork. If it is not too forward of me to inquire, said Tristram, might I ask what it is that you were in search of? My destiny, said the man after a short pause. My right to rule. And you? There's a young lady that I have offended with my behavior, said Tristram. I wish to make amends. As he said it, he knew it to be true. Interesting. So he's not searching for the star for his true love anymore, huh? The driver grunted. The forest canopy was thinning rapidly. Trees became sparser, and Tristram stared up at the mountains in front of them, and he gasped. Such mountains, he said. When you are older, said his companion, you must visit my citadel, high on the crags of Mount Huon. Now that is a mountain. And from there we can look down upon mountains next to which these, and he gestured towards the heights of Mount Belly ahead of them, are the merest foothills. Truth to tell, said Tristram, I hope to spend the rest of my life as a sheep farmer in the village of Wall, for I have now had as much excitement as any man could rightly need, what with candles and trees and the young lady and the unicorn. But I take the invitation in the spirit in which it was given, and thank you for it. If ever you visit Wall, then you must come to my house, and I shall give you woolen clothes and sheep cheese and all the mutton stew you can eat. You are far too kind, said the driver. The path was easier now, made of crushed gravel and grated rocks, and he cracked his whip to urge the 4 black stallions on faster. You saw a unicorn, you say? Tristran was about to tell his companion all about the encounter with the unicorn, but he thought better of it and simply said he was a most noble beast. Oh, what's the ooh about? What I mentioned, that he's not thinking about Victoria right now? Or seems to have forgotten about Victoria? The unicorns are the moon's creatures, said the driver. I've never seen one, but it is said that they serve the moon and do her bidding. We shall reach the mountains by tomorrow evening. I shall call a halt at sunset tonight. If you wish, you may sleep inside the coach. I, myself, shall sleep beside the fire. It's interesting because he just confirmed that the unicorn, which they said basically glowed like the moon, is actually like the moon's servant. And the moon actually visited Tristran in his dream, begging him to protect the star, who I guess is like her daughter. So the unicorn was actually sent for them. That's right. The moon said that it had done everything that it could for them and for the star. There was no change in his tone of voice, but Tristran knew, with a certainty that was both sudden and shocking in its intensity, that the man was scared of something, frightened to the depths of his soul. Lightning flickered on the mountain tops that night. Tristran slept on the leather seat of the coach, his head on a sack of oats. He dreamed of ghosts and of the moon and stars. The rain began at dawn, abruptly, as if the sky had turned to water. Low, gray clouds hid the mountains from sight. In the driving rain, Tristran and the coach driver hitched the horses to the carriage and set off. It was all uphill now, and the horses went no faster than a walk. You could go inside, said the driver. No point in us both getting wet. They had put on one-piece oilskins they had found beneath the driver's seat. It would be hard for me to be wetter, said Tristran, without my first leaping into a river. I shall stay here. 2 pairs of eyes and 2 pairs of hands may well be the saving of us. His companion grunted. He wiped the rain from his eyes and mouth with a cold, wet hand and then said, You're a fool, boy. But I appreciate it. He transferred the reins to his left hand and extended his right hand. I am known as Primus, the Lord Primus. Tristran Thorn, he said, feeling that the man had somehow earned the right to know his true name. They shook hands. The rain fell harder. The horses slowed to the slowest walk as the path became a stream, and the heavy rain cut off all vision as effectively as the thickest fog. There is a man, said the Lord Primus, shouting to be heard now over the rain, the wind whipping the words from his lips. He is tall, looks a little like me, but thinner, more crow-like. His eyes seem innocent and dull, but there is death in them. He is called Septimus, for he was the 7th boy child our father spawned. If you ever see him, if ever you see him, run and hide. His business is with me, but he will not hesitate to kill you if you stand in his way, or perhaps to make you his instrument with which to kill me. A wild gust of wind drove a tankard full of rainwater down Tristran's neck. He sounds a most dangerous man, said Tristran. He is the most dangerous man that you will ever meet. Tristran peered silently into the rain and the gathering darkness. It was becoming harder to see the road. Primus spoke again, saying, If you ask me, there is something unnatural about this storm. Unnatural? Or more than natural, supernatural, if you will. I hope there is an inn along the way. The horses need a rest, and I could do with a dry bed and a warm fire. And a good meal. Tristran shouted his agreement. They sat together, getting wetter. Tristran thought about the star and the unicorn. She would be cold by now, and wet. He worried about her broken leg and thought about how saddle-sore she must be. It was all his fault. He felt wretched. I am the most miserable person who ever lived, he said to the Lord Primus when they stopped to feed the horses feed bags of damp oats. You are young and in love, said Primus. Every young man in your position is the most miserable young man who has ever lived. Tristran wondered how Lord Primus could have divined the existence of Victoria Forrester. He imagined himself recounting his adventures to her back at Wall, in front of a blazing parlor fire, but somehow all of his tales seemed a little flat. Oh, he's dumb. He's stupid. Dusk seemed to have started at dawn that day. and now the sky was almost black. Their path continued to climb. The rain would let up for moments and then redouble, falling harder than ever. "Is that a light over there?" asked Tristran. "I cannot see anything. Maybe it was fool's fire or lightning," said Primus. And then they gained a bend in the road, and he said, "I was wrong. That is a light. Well spotted, young'un. But there are bad things in these mountains. We must only hope that they are friendly." The horses put on a fresh burst of speed now that their destination was in sight. A flash of lightning revealed the mountains rising steeply up on either side of them. "We're in luck," said Primus, his bass voice booming like thunder. "It's an inn." That's maybe where we'll end off this time. At the Sign of the Chariot is the next chapter. Let me just see. How are you feeling? My voice is just a little bit strained. I feel bad because I feel like we didn't do too much today with, like, time-wise. You know what? Let me take a second, and then maybe we'll continue a little bit longer. Thank you, though. Thank you for saying that. I'm glad you're enjoying so far. I'm just checking and seeing, like, the next chapter, and it's like 10 pages. That's not too bad. Maybe I can continue to chapter 8, and then we'll stop there. I think that's what I'll do, I think. So, just getting myself more comfortable. I know you can't see it, but I have a skirt on. So, the stars had been soaked to the skin when she arrived at the pass. The star had been soaked to the skin when she arrived at the pass. Sad and shivering, she was worried about the unicorn. They had found no food for it on the last day's journey, as the grasses and ferns of the forest had been replaced by gray rocks and stunted thorn bushes. The unicorn's unshod hooves were not meant for the rocky road, nor was its back meant to carry riders, and its pace became slower and slower. As they traveled, the star cursed the day that she had fallen to this wet, unfriendly world. It had seemed so gentle and welcoming when seen from high in the sky. That was before. Now she hated everything about it except the unicorn. In saddle sore and uncomfortable, she would have even happily spent time away from the unicorn. After a day of pelting rain, the lights of the inn were the most welcoming sights she'd seen in her time on Earth. "Watch your step, watch your step," pattered the raindrops on the stone. Oh, interesting that the rain has, like, a voice, too. The unicorn stopped 50 yards from the inn and would approach no closer. The door to the inn was opened, flooding the gray world with warm yellow light. "Hello there, dearie," called a welcoming voice from the open doorway. The star stroked the unicorn's wet neck and spoke softly to the animal, but it made no move, stood there frozen in the light of the inn like a pale ghost. "Will you be coming in, dearie, or will you be stopping out there in the rain?" The woman's friendly voice warmed the star, soothed her, just the right mixture of practicality and concern. "We can get you food if it's food you're after. There's a fire blazing in the hearth and enough hot water for a tub that'll melt the chill from your bones." I will need help coming in," said the star. "My leg." "Ugh, poor mite," said the woman. "I'll have my husband Billy carry you inside. There's hay and fresh water in the stables for your beast." The unicorn looked about wildly as the woman approached. There, there, dearie, I won't be coming too close. After all, it's been many a long year since I was maiden enough to touch a unicorn, and many a long year since such a one was seen in these parts. Nervously, the unicorn followed the woman into the stables, keeping its distance from her. It walked along the stable. It walked along the stable to the furthest stall, where it lay down in the dry straw, and the star scrambled off its back, dripping and miserable. Billy turned out to be a white-bearded, gruff sort of fellow. He said little, but carried the star into the inn and put her down on a three-legged stool in front of a crackling log fire. Poor dear, said the innkeeper's wife, who had followed them inside. Look at you, wet as a water nixie. Look at the puddle under you, and your lovely dress. Oh, the state of it! You must be soaked to the bone. And sending her husband away, she helped the star remove her dripping wet dress, which she placed on a hook near the fire, where each drip hissed and fizzed when it fell to the hot bricks of the hearth. There was a tin tub in front of her, and the innkeeper's wife put a paper screen around it. How'd you like your baths? She said solicitously. Warm, hot, or boil a lobster? I do not know. Sorry, that was a wrong voice. I do not know, said the star, naked but for the topaz stone on her silver chain about her waist. Her head all in a whirl at the strange turn that events had taken. For I have never had a bath before. Never had one. The innkeeper's wife looked astonished. Why, you poor duck. Well, we won't make it too hot, then. Call me if you need another copperful of water. I've got some going over the kitchen fire, and when you're done with the bath, I'll bring you some mulled wine and some sweet roasted turnips. Hold on. It's water time. What was that off for? That lull for. Oh, was it the voice thing? Oh, the skirt thing? Oh my god, my brain. I saw that when you wrote it too, and my I'm telling you, I'm tired. Yeah, I know. Not here today. Not at all. Anyway. And before the star could protest that she neither ate nor drank, the woman had bustled off, leaving the stars sitting in the tin tub, her broken leg and its splints sticking out of the water and resting on the three-legged stool. Initially, the water was indeed too hot, but as she became used to the heat, she relaxed and was, for the first time since she had tumbled from the sky, utterly happy. There's a love, said the innkeeper's wife, returning. How are you feeling now? Much better, thank you, said the star. And your heart? How does your heart feel? Asked the woman. My heart? It was a strange question, but the woman seemed genuinely concerned. It feels happier, more easy, less troubled. Good, that's good. Let us get it to burning high and hot within you, eh? Burning bright inside you. I'm sure that under your care, my heart shall blaze and burn with happiness, said the star. The innkeeper's wife leaned over and chucked the star under the chin. There's a pet, such a duck it is. The fine things it says. And the woman smiled indulgently and ran a hand through her gray streaked hair. She hung a thick toweling robe on the edge of the screen. This is for you to wear when you are done with your bath. Oh no, not to hurry, ducks. It'll be nice and warm for you, and your pretty dress will still be damp for a while now. Just give us a shout when you want to hop out of the tub, and I'll come give you a hand. Then she leaned over and touched the star's chest between her breasts with one cold finger, and she smiled. A good, strong heart, she said. There were good people on this benighted world, the star decided, warmed and contented. Outside, the rain and the wind pattered and howled through the mountain pass, but in the inn, at the sign of the chariot, all was warm and comfortable. Eventually, the innkeeper's wife assisted by her dull-faced daughter, helped the star out of her bath. The firelight glinted on the topaz set in silver, which the star wore on a knotted silver chain about her waist, until the topaz and the star's body vanished beneath the thick toweling of her robe. Now, my sweet, said the innkeeper's wife, you come over here and make yourself comfortable. She helped the star over to a long wooden table, at the head of which laid a long. I'm sorry. At the head of which were laid a cleaver and a knife, both of them with hilts of bone and blades of dark glass. Leaning and limping, the star made it to the table and sat down on the bench beside it. Outside there was a gust of wind, and the fire flared up green and blue and white. Then a deep voice boomed from outside the inn, over the howl of the elements. Service! Food! Wine! Fire! Where is the stable boy? Billy the innkeeper and his daughter made no move, but only looked at the woman in the red dress as if for instruction. She pursed her lips, and then she said, It can wait. For a little. After all, you are not going anywhere, my dearie? Then last to the star. Not on that leg of yours, and not until the rain lets up, eh? I appreciate your hospitality more than I can say, said the star simply and with feeling. Of course you do, said the woman in the red dress, and her fidgeting fingers brushed the black knives impatiently, as if there was something she could not wait to be doing. Plenty of time when these nuisances have gone, eh? The light of the inn was the happiest and best thing Tristran had seen on his journey through Fairy. While Primus bellowed for assistance, Tristran unhitched the exhausted horses and led them one by one into the stables on the side of the inn. There was a white horse asleep in the furthest stall, but Tristran was too busy to pause to inspect it. He knew, somewhere in the odd place inside him that knew directions and distances of things he had never seen and the places he had never been, that the star was close at hand, and this comforted him and made him nervous. He knew that the horses were more exhausted and more hungry than he was. His dinner, and thus he inspected his confrontation with the star, could wait. And thus he suspected, rather, his confrontation with the star could wait. I'll groom the horses, he told Primus. They'll catch a chill otherwise. The tall man rested his huge hand on Tristran's shoulders. Good lad. I'll send a potboy out with some burnt ale for you. Tristran thought about the star as he brushed down the horses and picked out their hooves. What would he say? What would she say? He was brushing the last of the horses when a blank-looking pot girl came out to him with a tankard of steaming wine. Put it down over there, he told her. I'll drink it with good will as soon as my hands are free. She put it down on the top of a tack box and went out without saying anything. It was then that the horse in the end stall got to its feet and began to kick against the door. Settle down there, called Tristran. Settle down, fellow, and I'll see if I cannot find you some warm oats and bran for all of you. There was a large stone on the stallion's front inside hoof, and Tristran removed it with care. Madam, he decided he would say, please accept my heartfelt and most humble apologies. Sir, the star would say in her turn, that I shall do with all my heart. That I shall do with all my heart. Now, let us go to your village, where you shall present me to your true love as a token of your devotion to her. Right, that's how it's going to go. His ruminations were interrupted by an enormous clattering. As a huge white horse, but he realized immediately it was not a horse, kicked down the door of its stall and came charging desperately toward him, its horn lowered. Tristran threw himself onto the straw on the stable floor, his arms about his head. Moments passed. He raised his head. The unicorn had stopped in front of the tankard, was lowering its horn into the mulled wine. Awkwardly, Tristran got to his feet. The wine was steaming and bubbling, and it came to Tristran then, the information surfacing from some long-forgotten fairy tale or piece of children's lore, that a unicorn's horn was proof against poison? He whispered, and the unicorn raised its head and stared into Tristran's eyes, and Tristran knew that it was the truth. His heart was pounding hard in his chest. Around the inn, the wind was screaming like a witch in her madness. Tristran ran to the stable door. Then he stopped and thought. He fumbled in his tunic pocket, finding the lump of wax, which was all that remained of his candle, with a dried copper leaf sticking to it. He peeled the leaf away from the wax with care. Then he raised the leaf to his ear and listened to what it told him. Wine, my lord? Asked the middle-aged woman in the long red dress when Primus had entered the inn. I am afraid not, he said. Have a personal superstition that until the day I see my brother's corpse cold on the ground before me, I shall drink only my own wine and eat only food I have obtained and prepared myself. This I shall do here, if you have no objection. I shall, of course, pay you as if it were your own wine I was drinking. If I might trouble you to put this bottle of mine near the fire to take the chill from it. Now, I have a companion on my journey, a young man who is attending to the horses. He has sworn no such oath, and I am sure and I am sure that if you could send him a mug of burnt ale, it would help take the chill from his bones. The pot maid bobbed a curtsy, and she scuttled back to the kitchens. So, mine host, said Primus to the white-bearded innkeeper, how are your beds here at the back of beyond? Have you straw mattresses? Are there fires in the bedrooms? And I know with increasing pleasure that there is a bathtub in front of your fireplace. If there's a copper of steaming water, I shall have to have a bath later. But I shall pay you no more than a small silver coin for it, mind. The innkeeper looked to his wife, who said, Our beds are good, and I shall have the maid make up a fire in the bedroom for you and your companion. Primus removed his dripping black robe and hung it by the fire, beside the star's still damp blue dress. Then he turned and saw the young lady sitting at the table. Another guest? He said. Well met, milady, in this noxious weather. At that, there was a loud clattering from the stable next door. Something must have disturbed the horses, said Primus, concerned. Perhaps the thunder, said the innkeeper's wife. Aye, perhaps, said Primus. Something else was occupying his attention. He walked over to the star and stared into her eyes for several heartbeats. You, he hesitated. Then with certainty, you have my father's stone. You have the power of Stormhold. The girl glared up at him with eyes the blue of sky. Well then, she said, ask me for it, and I can have done with the stupid thing. The innkeeper's wife hurried over and stood at the head of the table. I'll not have you bothering the other guests now, my dearie ducks, she told him sternly. Primus's eyes fell upon the knives upon the wood of the tabletop. He recognized them. There were tattered scrolls in the vaults of Stormhold, in which those knives are pictured, and their names were given. They were old things from the first age of the world. The front door of the inn banged open. Primus! Called Tristran, running in. They have tried to poison me! The Lord Primus reached for his short sword, but even as he went for it, the Witch Queen took the longest of the knives and drew the blade of it in one smooth, practical movement across his throat. For Tristran, it all happened too fast to follow. He entered, saw the star, and Lord Primus, and the innkeeper and his strange family, and then the blood was spurting in a crimson fountain in the firelight. Get him! Called the woman in the scarlet dress. Get the brat! Billy and the maid ran toward Tristran, and it was then that the unicorn entered the inn. Tristran threw himself out of the way. The unicorn reared up on its hind legs, and a blow from one of its sharp hooves sent the pot maid flying. Billy lowered his head and ran headlong at the unicorn as if he were about to butt it with his forehead. The unicorn lowered its head also, and Billy, the innkeeper, met his unfortunate end. Stupid! Screamed the innkeeper's wife furiously, and she advanced upon the unicorn, a knife in each hand, blood staining her right hand and her forearm the same color as her dress. Tristran had thrown himself onto his hands and knees and had crawled toward the fireplace. In his left hand he had hold of the lump of wax, all that remained of the candle that had brought him here. He had been squeezing it in his hand until it was soft and malleable. This had better ought to work, said Tristran to himself. He hoped that the tree had known what she was talking about. Behind him the unicorn screamed in pain. Tristran ripped the lace from his jerkin and closed the wax around it. What is happening? Asked the star, who had crawled toward Tristran on her hands and knees. I don't really know, he admitted. The witch woman howled then. The unicorn had speared her with its horn through the shoulder. It lifted her off the ground triumphantly, preparing to hurl her to the ground and then to dash her to death beneath its sharp hooves, when, impaled as she was, the witch woman swung around and thrust the point of the longer of the rock glass knives into the unicorn's eye and far into its skull. Oh. The beast dropped to the wooden floor of the inn, blood dripping from its side and from its eye and from its open mouth. First, it fell to its knees and then collapsed utterly at the utterly as the life fled. Its tongue was piebald, and it protruded most pathetically from the unicorn's dead mouth. The witch queen pulled her body from the horn, and one hand gripping her wounded shoulder, the other holding her cleaver, she staggered to her feet. Her eyes scanned the room, alighting on Tristran and the star huddled by the fire. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, she lurched toward them, a cleaver in her hand and a smile upon her face. The burning golden heart of a star at peace is so much finer than the flickering heart of a frightened little star, she told them, her voice oddly calm and detached, coming as it was from that blood-bespattered face. But even the heart of a star who is afraid and scared is better by far than no heart at all. Tristran took the star's hand in his right hand. "Stand up," he told her. "I cannot," she said simply. "Stand or we die now," he told her, getting to his feet. The star nodded, and awkwardly, resting her weight on him, she began to try to pull herself to her feet. "Stand or you die now," echoed the witch queen. "Oh, you die now, children, standing or sitting. It is all the same to me." She took another step toward them. "Now," said Tristran, one hand gripping the star's arm, the other holding his makeshift candle. "Now walk!" And he thrust his left hand into the fire. There was pain and burning such that he could have screamed, and the witch queen stared at him as if he were madness personified. Then his improvised wick caught and burned with a steady blue flame, and the world began to shimmer around them. "Please walk," he begged the star. "Don't let go of me." And she took an awkward step. They left the inn behind them, the howls of the witch queen ringing in their ears. They were underground, and the candlelight flickered from the wet cave walls, and with their next halting step they were in a desert of white sand in the moonlight, and with their third step they were high above the earth, looking down on the hills and trees and rivers far below them. And it was then that the last of the wax ran molten over Tristran's hand, and the burning became impossible for him to bear, and the last of the flame burned out forever. And that's where we will leave off today. The next chapter is titled which treats of castles in the air and other matters. Which treats of castles in the air and other matters. Let's talk. What do you guys think? I feel really bad for the unicorn. It was a very heroic unicorn. No. Mm-mm. This was like the middle of the movie. Or like just before we reached the middle. I think actually it was like the middle of the movie. Or I suppose maybe I'd call this end of Act 1 of 3. I think you'll remember more as we go on. I know. Yeah. The unicorn was really, really brave. Yeah, I mean, in the movie, it still dies in the movie, but it has an easier death. Like, from what we see, the unicorn just looks like it unfortunately burns in the fire. I don't know if that's easier or not. I think probably than what it gets here, but yeah. Something I do want to say is that I feel like through reading this that yeah, I know, yeah. I feel like through reading this that the movie often took a comical tone with stuff, and I wish they didn't. Um there's a lot of stuff that I'm seeing here, like Primus's relationship with Tristran, where he actually seemed like a pretty good guy. And like, I don't know, cool. Like, there was nothing wrong with him here. Whereas in the movie, he was sort of portrayed as like a bit of a wuss, if I remember correctly. Like, he was like, I don't know, there was like, he was just played for laughs, versus in this, they really had like a good bond. I was sad to see him die too. He seemed, again, like a good guy. But yeah. I do want to say, who is it that played the... God, I can't remember who played the witch in the movie. Michelle Pfeiffer played the witch in the movie. While I wish she had black hair, because I don't know, there's something, you can see it more when she starts like regaining her age. You can see like the gray in it, versus like if she's blonde, you don't see that as much. I mean, they did stuff with that to show it anyway, but I wish she looked more to the character. But her acting seems pretty spot on. Like, I remember her line reads in the movie, and they sound exactly as they're described in the book. Mm-hmm. And that's something too about Primus, is that he seems pretty smart. Like, he seems pretty intelligent, and very crafty, and we didn't see that in the movie. Sorry, I have an itch in my throat. I liked the tree that was talking to Tristran. I wish there was more of that in the movie too. I feel like some of the more magical elements of things were missed out on in the movie. Yeah. I'm just gonna fix my headphones. Not that it matters at this point, but yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you guys have anything else that you wanted to talk about? Hmm. Maybe. Me too. Hmm. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed. Please, give a like to this video. It helps me to know that you guys are enjoying these streams and want to keep this going. Please go ahead and, the whole shebang, like, comment, and subscribe. Leave a comment if you want any of your thoughts immortalized, or if you have any questions on anything, that'd be the place to ask. Next time, we'll be back next Sunday at 5 p.m. to continue the story and read onwards. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great evening. This has been Sky. Bye-bye.